Hi again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show. We are brought to you by Moonlight Graham, Modern Dental Benefits. Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the program. Craig Caston, thank you very much. Our guest last week, Maya Payne Smart, the wife of Shaka Smart, the MarquetteHoops.com basketball coach, Marquette coach, I guess. Hopefully we'll get him on here with that little Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to six. If you saw the show, it's amazing. Either way, the book is a must read. But John, then we got into, with Maya, the idea of being a coach's wife, the adjustments she's made, how she's embraced her role in that regard.
Yeah, last week's show probably got the most feedback for any guest we've had in the 2 years we've had the TV show. She did a great job there. Got a lot of feedback from teaching kids to read by putting closed caption on your TV set when they're younger, just so they can see the words and associate that with the speaking. But now we were able to ask her toward the end of the interview a little bit about her role in Marquette basketball, going to the games, what she thought of various things. And she also talked about her daughter now starting her athletic career.
Zora, yes, most insightful. Maya Payne Smart. Your education is very impressive, to say the least. We talk about Northwestern, the amazing School of Journalism there, and then on to Harvard. Talk about that, starting from your growing up in Akron.
Yes. So I was born in a hospital in Ravenna, Ohio. And Ravenna is a little town outside of a little town, Kent, Ohio. My mom worked at Kent State University her entire career. At Kent State University, there's a children's literature festival, the Virginia Hamilton Festival, and it's still running to this day. And so as a result of that festival on that campus, my mom would always bring home just beautifully illustrated, wonderfully written children's literature. And so those were on my shelf as a child. And then moved to Akron, I think when I was in kindergarten, graduated from Akron Public Schools, was there first grade through 12th grade, and just had a solid education that prepared me. I felt like I could do anything. And so I was the kind of person who had a positive formal education experience and felt prepared, and also wasn't intimidated by applying. When I look back on it now, I only applied to 5 schools. I had a high level of confidence. Today, I know kids are applying to 10, 20 schools. So it was also a different time. But I had a babysitter who went to Harvard 10 years before I did. And then I had another babysitter whose older brother had gone to Harvard. And they were both Black kids from Northeast Ohio. So I also had that, there's something to seeing things. So when you see it, you know you can do it. So I had 2 examples of Black kids from my community who'd gone to public school who went to Harvard. So it felt possible and was.
Did you feel empowered because of your educational background? And isn't that, to a degree, what you're trying to do for families and their children?
Yes. So a lot of parents will say, oh, my child doesn't like to read or they don't want to read. And so part of that may be cultural shifts and technology, and there are more videos and things for them to consume easily. But a lot of kids don't enjoy reading because they're not good at it. So I think we give every kid a shot if we ensure that they have these fundamental reading skills early. And then it becomes a matter not of struggling through only the text that you're given in school. Then you're empowered, to use the word that you referenced. You're empowered to find the things that you want to read. I know one mom whose son she wants him to read literature. He doesn't want to read fiction. He wants to read technical manuals. And so my message to her is reading is reading. He has skills. He's spending time on task, building his comprehension and reading fluency. He's also building a really robust, specialized technical vocabulary that will serve him well when he becomes, I suspect, an engineer.
Yeah. You mentioned early literacy. That I never heard that term before, early literacy, but really it's not necessarily reading.
Right. So I think part of what I'm trying to communicate in the book, by starting with focusing on that birth to 6 range, is that there are things that directly contribute to your ability to read that don't look like reading or don't sound like reading. So helping clarify for people that those conversations and the vocabulary and the oral language skills that you help your child develop are really significant for reading. So it's kind of like I want people to recognize the importance of bedtime stories and reading and print-related things, and also understand that your conversations and the vocabulary you build are critical as well. There's a nonprofit organization in Boulder, Colorado called the Lena Foundation, and they developed a really cool technology, which I describe in the book. It sort of is the size of a pager or a beeper from back in the day. And the device sits in a pocket in the bib of a young child, and it measures the language environment, natural language environment around them. So it's sophisticated enough to count the number of adult words spoken, and also to count the child's words, and also their coos and babbles, count that as speech as well. And it's sophisticated enough to distinguish between coos, babbles, and words from crying and digestive noises and all these other things. So really, really, really impressive technology. And numerous researchers around the country and even other parts of the world have used it to do studies. And one longitudinal study using that device found that kids who had the most back and forth conversational exchanges between 18 and 24 months, years later when they were in middle school, had larger vocabularies, better verbal expressive abilities, and even higher IQs. So it's really important for parents to understand that verbal oral language piece in addition to the phonics, how both of those things, the product of both of those things is really skilled, fluent reading comprehension.
It's kind of like Annie Sullivan to Helen Keller. You don't have to convey or communicate with the written word. There's other ways to get them to get Helen Keller to know what you're talking about. She finally got that water. You probably remember what that was, but this is something that I think is really, really interesting. It's a game changer, and I wish you all the luck on this book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this is a record. We have been with you. You've been gracious, maybe a half hour or so. We haven't talked Marquette basketball yet, John. And but before we do that a little bit in your role and what have you as a wife of a basketball coach, how did you meet Shaka? And what most impressed you about this man that you got to the point and said, I'd like to spend my life with him?
So a friend of mine years ago, actually right before I moved to Chicago for graduate school in journalism, Shaka, a friend of mine worked with Shaka at the University of Akron where he was an assistant coach. And she said, you have to meet this guy. And I was like, why? So at that time, she gave him my email. So we corresponded by email at first, and I gave him my number, and then we went out on a date. And so the things that impressed me immediately, and all those years ago, I think it was 2004, were the same things that impress people about him now. Just his incredible integrity and deep thoughtfulness and unique perspective. So all of these things come through in conversation with him, whether you're talking about basketball or any other topic in life. He is a deep thinker and a serious person and a mission-driven person, which is something that I am as well.
Yeah, a good match.
So I remember on our very first date, he was talking about this philosophy he had of like winning people and what went into that. And I don't remember the details of what he said, but I do remember being impressed. And then we've pretty much been together ever since. So I graduated from journalism school, we got married, we moved to Clemson, South Carolina, then Gainesville, Florida, then Richmond, Virginia, Austin, Texas, and now we're here in Milwaukee, which is wonderful for a few reasons. One, we're both Midwesterners. So I love the idea of Zora, having that experience. I love having 4 seasons. I think snow builds character. So I'm glad that she's having...
We ought to have a lot of it as natives, for sure.
So I know a lot of people who've stayed in Ohio their whole lives. And so I always tell them, I was like, when you move around, there really are differences in regions and in places. And so we have all really enjoyed being here. And then Marquette specifically is nice because of just the warmth of the community. Here I am sitting with both of you talking about something that's not basketball related, but I feel very welcomed into the Marquette community in so many ways.
That's fabulous. There's a great humility about you, and even from afar about your husband. And you can tell, he connects with his players. That may be one of his greatest gifts. They love him. And people are loving you as you go out and about. it's one thing to have all this talent and to have a mission, a great mission, whether it be writing or but the person, people, they can tell when you have a person of integrity, a person, again, with humility, and that's important as well, isn't it? That makes the complete package.
It does. He has an incredible capacity for relationships. So I'm introverted and, have a small number of really close friends. I'm always impressed by just the sheer volume of people that he can keep in touch with and stay in touch with over years. And so we have, those personality differences that are complementary. And just like over time, I've only grown in my appreciation for all of those things that I first fell in love with.
I would say very honestly now, no pandering here, that you're graceful. You're graceful in front of the camera. Now you're podcasting, Zoom. So this has brought you out, hasn't it?
It's so funny because when I went to journalism school, they were always trying to get me to take the broadcast classes. So at that time at Medill, they had different tracks. They had a newspaper track and they had online media. I don't remember what they were calling it at that time, if they were calling it new media or what, but this was in 2005. So things like iPods were relatively new. So podcasting was new at that time. And then there was the traditional broadcast and people were like, oh, you'd be great on camera. I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm an introvert. So I wanted to do the meat and potatoes newspaper reporting. And people would kind of say, well, that industry's dying, these other opportunities. But I'm still very appreciative for that experience because what journalism school gives you is just that ability to go up to anyone and ask anything. And that's a useful skill set, whether you're writing or not, just to keep asking until you understand, to have that mindset of not having the answers initially and not being a know-it-all.
Yeah, exactly. But as you point out, the mission is so great that for an introvert, I need to overcome that. I don't say it's anything negative. We need introverts. Believe me, ask my wife. I'm a talker. But how about in terms of being a basketball, as busy as you are, as busy as Shaka is? This is not their traditional 9 to 5, right? And oh, by the way, you're raising a beautiful daughter, Zara, who, as you point out, is now 11.
Yes. So one thing I'll credit being a basketball wife with, I think it brought out a different part of my personality because immediately, as soon as we were at Clemson, that was my first, after we got married, we moved to Clemson. So that first season, I was very vocal on the sidelines.
Great.
So, and even now, I still yell. It's the only context. Well, now I also yell and scream at my daughter's soccer and basketball games, but like I'm definitely very vocal, but I'm yelling, win anyway, when there's a bad call made in different situations.
Yeah, and my mom was also the wife of a high school basketball coach. And so she asked me to ask you, do you go to all the games? Do you get nervous? Do you go to just home games or do you go on the road also? How much time do you have? And do you have any superstitions?
I go to all the home games. So I don't recall, if I missed one, it had to be something major, like my daughter had a game at the same time, but definitely go to all the home games. When we first got married, I went to all the away games also. So, because I didn't have my daughter yet to coordinate her schedule. Now I'll go to away games if it's somewhere tropical, like Maui, or I do go to I don't schedule anything in March. So I expect us to be playing deep into March. So I'm like, I'm not booking anything in that time. So that time is reserved for championships. And then, so there definitely has a scheduling impact.
So then, do you get nervous before a game? Did you have any athletic background? Did you participate in anything?
I was not a basketball star. I think I played maybe 3 seasons total. I was the defensive player of the year, maybe like in 5th grade on a little rec team. Middle school.
So that's where Shaka gets it from, right? From his wife. Play that deep.
No, that's not where he gets it from. And then in middle school, I think I played 7th grade. I scored 1 point. I made 1 free throw the whole season. And that was pretty much the end of I played a little bit in high school. I was more of a soccer player. I tore my ACL in a soccer game. So that was the end of my basketball career as well. But what I lacked, as I tell him, I was like, I'm a great athlete. Like our daughter gets her athleticism and speed from me. But I lacked a certain competitive drive. So I would say he's 99th percentile in competitiveness in all things, not just basketball.
Is there something you might share, Maya, that we don't know about Shaka?
I'll think about that, and then I'll answer your other question, which was, do I get nervous?
Oh, yes, for you.
Okay.
So I'm not nervous before the game. So I'm only nervous if we're behind at the very end of the game, because I find overtime completely nerve-wracking. So close games, and we have had many of those. Close games are not my thing. So I would just reserve nerves until the end. And then I try to protect the energy around me. So oftentimes other people, even guests of mine, will be very nervous. I'm like, hey, if you're nervous before, like, keep that to yourself. I don't want to hear about it.
You don't want that vibe. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so something people don't know about Shaka, he is incredibly kind and empathetic. So I think when you think about sports and competition and, trying to win and all of which he absolutely is all of those things, but then he has this other side of just extreme caring and concern for people, which I've also had the opportunity to witness up close. So it's this toggling.
They say that love is willing the good of the other, and the love that Shaka has seems to be self-sacrificial, putting the kids first. He obviously recruits a great young man in terms of their character.
Do you have 13 sons or
Yeah.
assistant coaches?
So I don't feel with college students, and some of this may be because when, like, my first season as a assistant coach's wife, I was so young
Right.
that the players felt like about my age. So over time, so I don't have a team mom vibe. And also the players on our team, they have their own moms who are wonderful.
Good.
Supportive people. So I don't think of it that way. But I do enjoy being around the guys, particularly when you're able to see them develop over time. Because there's something really powerful about the college years, that I was a totally different person when I graduated than I was when I arrived from Akron, Ohio at 17.
How so,
college.
Maya? How so?
How was I different?
How so, yes.
I think I was sharper. I was smarter. I was more driven to have an impact. And I didn't even know what it was. But I think during those years, you grow in just maturity and exposure. I think one of the things about college that changed me was just exposure to so many different kinds of people from around the world who had different interests and who had different areas of excellence. So particularly at Harvard, you're seeing the person who was the best at this particular thing, the person who invented this thing at 15, or who went to the Olympics in this sport. Or so I had a broadened sense of possibility for myself and for others, but also a broader sense of the impact that I could have in the world if I focused on something in particular.
Yeah.
So I didn't know at that age what it would be, but I think I left with a great sense of possibility. So for watching players who I've been fortunate enough to see grow for 4 years and beyond, so because of the way Shaka maintains relationships, some of his early players are now coaches also. And so that has been wonderful.
Yeah. The Shaka tree is growing, isn't it? Yeah, the coaching tree. May we ask just a couple more questions? You've been so kind about your time, John. I'm going to leave it to you.
Sure. When you started off as a coach's wife of an assistant coach, who were your mentors in that regard? Did you get any advice from anyone to help you?
So at that time, Shaka was an assistant for Oliver Purnell, who was a wonderful coach. Shaka had worked for him previously at Dayton, had been, I think, the video coordinator years before. So when we went, Shaka was an assistant at Clemson, and Oliver Purnell's wife, Vicki Purnell, was a wonderful model of a coach's wife. So I actually called her when Shaka got his first head coaching job at VCU and asked, what advice do you have for me? And one bit of advice that I remember she gave me was not to do things that I don't want to do, which I appreciated. So that has allowed me the space and perspective to say, no, I don't want to do that thing. I don't want to participate in that way for whatever reason. It could be time. It could be not my expertise, but I will contribute in this way. And that works out better because people get on board with you when you're working in your areas of strength. So I don't run around trying to do everything.
There's a lot of wisdom in that because, as you are well aware, you're living it. You're being pulled from every direction, right?
Yes.
40 years ago, when I was a student at Sports Information, I would watch the coaches use pay phones. They didn't have individual phones, and it seemed like there was actually a segment during the year where the year ended in March, and there was maybe a 3-week to 6-week period where they could decompress and not have to work. Now, with the advent of, it seems like 24/7, 365 recruiting and social media, how in the world, I mean, you could spend 24 hours a day recruiting and talking to people. How do you set limits? How do you cope with that? I would think that would be extremely difficult.
It is. Well, we've just sort of gotten used to sort of the pace of it. And there are changes every year sort of in the recruiting calendar and when things are happening. And some of it depends on, how many players you're trying to get and all those sorts of things. But I think in general, Shaka just has an incredible capacity to make space and time for people. So I've been really impressed by his ability as a dad to, there's a toll on him, but he makes time for our daughter also. So she recently decided she wants to play basketball. So he's out there in the driveway, like trying to coach her and teach her as well, or he's back in the backyard playing soccer. So there's like only so many hours in the day, and he makes the best use of them of anyone I've ever seen.
At the banquet, Steve the Homer True had a player panel, and he was the MC of the event, and there's probably 200 people at the Italian Community Center, and they said, Homer made a comment that Shaka is very cerebral. He's more cerebral than, the typical coach you would find in Division I. Tell us something about him that we may not know. And it came out that for Christmas, I think Oso said, for Christmas, he gave us all books as presents. And Homer said, well, that's wonderful. And he got the big warm and fuzzy. He goes, all right, now be honest. How many of you have read the book? And I saw Kolick and Joplin kind of looked at each other like, oh.
Who absolutely has read the book is Stevie.
Yeah, and Stevie and Oso raised their hands, and they were on it. And Homer just said, thank you for being honest.
So Stevie
but
Mitchell.
The thing is, so they'll have those books. They may not read them right away, but there will come a time. And he's very thoughtful in his selection of who gets which book, and he's read them all himself. So and some are shorter, like the 4 Agreements, which is about, I think one of the 4 agreements is be impeccable with your word. So that's just a great life lesson. And so maybe you don't read it when you're 19 or 20, but maybe they'll find it on their bookshelf when they're 35 and flip through it and have a new perspective.
We talk about Stevie Mitchell being just a glue, a key part of the team for Shaka, and he has a high basketball IQ. So you're telling us it goes beyond just basketball, right?
Oh, Stevie has a 4.0.
Really?
So
Really? In what?
He is I think maybe finance or something.
It's business, I believe.
Okay, fantastic.
And then also had, I think it was 42 credits in high school here, 42 college credits in high school in Phoenix. So there's some pretty smart people that are real go-getters on the team. I'm always struck by, and I've seen hundreds of post-game press conferences with coaches over the years, but Shaka is different in that he spends a lot of time, puts a lot of emphasis on the relationships within the team. Even the people who didn't play that game, thank you for what you did during the practice that prepared us for it. So everybody feels like they contributed to it. And I thought, that's really interesting. It's almost like he comes across as like the CEO of an organization, and he's appreciating the workers who contributed, kind of a thing. It's just different than, our energy was bad, or the refs made the bad call. There's a greater depth of his answers in those press conferences that it's impressive.
He has a good ability. One of his mentors is George Raveling, so he is featured in this new movie Air about Michael Jordan. So he's formerly a coach and was a Nike executive for a long time. And George Raveling talks about there being kind of three jobs in one when you're a basketball coach at this level. So you're, maybe at every level. So you're coaching, which is the basketball, the X and O's. You're managing your staff, all of these other responsibilities, administrative things. And then you're leading, that's, the vision, the big picture, where are we going, the values, all those things. And I think Shaka really excels as a coach, obviously. I think he really shines as a leader and is getting pretty darn good at the managing too. So I think he'll be, as the biased wife, just completely unstoppable in a short amount of time. So I think the depth of his answers in those situations when he is asked questions in post-game situations just speaks to his depth as a person, the depth of the reading he's done and the depth of the thinking that he's done. He's a big journaler, so that may be something people don't know about him. So he has, and I printed out little labels with the dates on them so they're in order. And so he can look back and find a journal from this time 3 or 4 years ago and see what he was thinking about, team dynamics. So the depth of the answers, the nuance of the answers that he gives are a result of just all that thinking he's done.
Relationships are key nowadays in the era of the portal and NIL, because it's easy to go for the best money, or it's easy to go, coach didn't yell at me, coach only played me 20 minutes, not 25. I'm going to leave, I'm going to transfer, and I don't have to sit out a year anymore. But having that relationship, I think that's key for success, I believe, going forward.
Yes, relationships are always critical. And part of that is being able to get kids' attention. And so in these, almost 20 years where I've seen college basketball up close, kids are different and changing as a result of some of the things we talked about earlier in relationships to the book, technology, social media, just noise and distractions. And so it's relationships have always been important, but how you even get someone's attention to form a relationship is changing.
Maya Payne Smart, what a delight indeed. John Dodds, she's excellence. Your website, in my biased opinion, is excellence.
Well, thanks, Pip. It's MarquetteHoops.com. It's part of the 24/7 network, part of the CBS Digital subsidiary. If you want to see this show again, just go to the top left-hand corner there. It says archive. All our shows are archived. And if you want to be kept abreast on our newsletter, our upcoming events and guests, please drop your email in that widget. And please, if you know of a Marquette fan that would be interested, especially out of the viewing area, please send a link to the archive of the show.
As always, the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show is brought to you by Moonlight Graham, a proud sponsor of the program. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits. Greg Caston, thank you very much. Now, for John Dodds, who makes all these guests happen, our producer, Jason Ruck, indispensable. I'm Tom Pippins. Thanks again, everybody. We will look forward to seeing you again soon. Go Golden Eagles, and God bless.